Jesus saves. Spread the tidings all around. Jesus saves, Jesus saves. Bear the news to every land. Climb the steep to mountain ways. Onward 'tis our Lord's command. Jesus saves, Jesus saves. Wafted on the rolling tide. Jesus saves, Jesus saves. Tell to sinners far and wide. Jesus saves, Jesus saves. Sing you islands of the sea. Echo back you ocean caves. Earth shall keep her jubilee. Jesus saves, Jesus saves. On the last, give the winds a mighty voice. Jesus saves, Jesus saves. Let the nations now rejoice. Jesus saves, Jesus saves. Shout salvation full and free. Highest hills and deepest caves. This our song of victory. Jesus saves, Jesus saves. And all God's people said, amen.
Well, what an incredible day that we have had already. And I was thinking this afternoon about all those families that came today. Probably many of those who don't have a church home that they are a part of. And I think we were anticipating about 40 to 50 individuals coming that are part of GLG. And it's evident that the majority of them came. The little activity books that we gave out to the preschoolers, I think we had ordered 50, and they're almost all gone. So that's a great testament to how many were here today. And so be in prayer for those families and how we can continue to minister to them and get them plugged into what God is doing at Chestnut Grove Baptist Church. We gave out the gift bags. We tried doing some fresh new things to really reach out to our guests. And in fact, how many of you took one of those invitation cards last Sunday and gave one out, at least one, to somebody? A few hands went up. Well, I can say with confidence that I know they worked, because there was at least one person here, and I kind of wanted to ask, but I didn't want to embarrass anybody or put anybody on the spot, but I kind of wanted to ask this morning how many were here because they received an invitation from somebody. But I know for a fact that there was one person, or a couple, a husband and a wife, who were here because they received an invitation card. So they work. So make sure you pick up some more. I don't know that we've brought any over here since we have reopened over here, but we will make sure that they are in place so that you can take some with you. I had a church member telling me that they were handing them out at McDonald's, going through the drive-thru, just handing out one to the first window you come through, and then handing one out the second window. We went to Chick-fil-A on Friday, and we were putting them on, before we left, we put one on every table. So there's creative ways that you can leave those invitations, and we want to give everybody that we can an opportunity to come and hear the truth of Jesus Christ and hear the gospel and have an opportunity to receive Christ. Well, tonight we are in Luke chapter 5, and this was the message that I had prepared several months ago, I guess, thinking about reopening the church. When we reopen the sanctuary or the worship center, and when we reopen, then we want to, I want to preach this message. But as we got closer, I realized that's not what God had planned for me to preach. And so that's why we preach from Revelation chapter 19 this morning. So tonight you get the leftovers. And sometimes leftovers are just as good, if not better, than they were the first time around. And so this is what I had originally planned to preach this morning, but we're going to look at tonight. And if you listen intently and attentively, then I will get done as quick as I can so that we can spend time giving the grand tour of our newly remodeled worship center. And I know this is going to be a place that we can be not necessarily proud of, because it's not about us, but a place that we know that we have given God our very best, and we will be able to come in here and worship for many, many years to come. We went, 21 years without doing any major renovations, and it was well past time. I think the project began in 2016 when we started doing a capital campaign to raise some funds, and some plans were put in place. But it wasn't until that we decided to hire our designing women, Robin Helms and Terry Thomas. When we hired them to do the job, boy, things started rolling. In fact, I'll just take just a moment just to share a little bit about that. Jet, who kind of headed our team up, he knew them because they came in and remodeled their clubhouse for their neighborhood association. And he got to know them. They did an incredible job. If you went to Terry Reynolds' retirement or going away party that we had, it was there, and that was a result of their remodeling job. And so Jet introduced some of the other leaders who were involved in this to meet them, and when they came in and said, hey, we can do this, we can do that, and we just thought that they were a perfect fit for us. And so they came in and started doing this, started doing that, and next thing we know, they said, we're ready to go in 2 weeks. What? Because we've been doing this for, what now, 6 years? Or almost 6 years, and just little bit by little bit, not really getting anywhere. And then all of a sudden, within 2 weeks, we got to move out. And so it was a big shock to us. But once they got things going, and they told us, now we're only going to be out of the sanctuary for 3 weeks. Well, you see how that turned out. And so we had planned. We said, let's go ahead and let's create a little bit of a buffer. Well, we needed every hour of that buffer because there were setbacks. There were things that didn't go according to plan. There were things that just said, that's not what we wanted, but that's what happened. And so we can talk about that a little bit in our grand tour if you're so inclined to ask those questions. But it's amazing how God lined all that up so that we can now have something that we are very, very excited about, and we know that God will be pleased with our gifts. You know, I heard it said many, many years ago about a church that I'm very familiar with, and I've always followed the example they set. And they built this monstrosity of a campus, gorgeous facilities. Everything was first class all the way. They didn't spare any expense, and people complained about that. People who didn't go to church there, and probably a lot who did as well. They complained about all the gobs of money that were spent on their facilities. And their answer was, well, when you go back to the Old Testament, and we don't throw out the Old Testament, do we? I mean, we read the Old Testament because that points to Jesus. And you look at how God meticulously designed the temple. First, when it was in the tabernacle and the tent. Then when he told Solomon how to build the temple, they spared no expense. They used the finest. And it's not because they wanted to brag about it. It's not so they could pat themselves on the back. It's not so that they could go out and say that we got the very best. It's so they can say, we have given our very best to God. And that's what we desire to do here, is to always give our very best to God in all that we do, especially as we worship Him. Well, tonight, as we continue our celebration, I titled this, Celebrating with the Groom. And it's so fitting. I mean, it really is amazing how God did this, because this morning, as we looked at Revelation 19, one of the celebrations that he pointed out there in Revelation 19 was the celebration with a wedding. And we looked at how Jesus is the bridegroom and the church is the bride. Well, we look at that here tonight as we look at Luke chapter 5, beginning in verse 33. And we read there, Then they said to him, Why do the disciples of John fast often and make prayers, and likewise those of the Pharisees, but yours eat and drink? Okay, well, there's the question that's asked to Jesus. And if you were here last Sunday, this is basically a follow-up from Jesus going and meeting with Matthew, or also known as Levi. He gets saved, becomes a follower of Christ, takes Jesus to his other tax collector friends, and they are now eating a meal together in Matthew's house, and he is being questioned. Why are you eating with sinners? Why are you hanging out with these people that we despise? And they're wicked, they're evil, they are sinners. We don't like them. Why are you hanging out with them? Well, now here is the follow-up question. All right, Jesus, you think you're so good? Why do your disciples not fast when those who are followers of John the Baptist and those who are Pharisees, they fast often, while yours just go on and keep on eating and drinking? We don't know who necessarily asked this question. It could have been a Pharisee. They like to trip Jesus up, or try to. It could have been one of the disciples of John. They want to know if this truly was the Messiah. And it could also be the very fact that John the Baptist has now been arrested, and so they are now leaderless, and they could be now reverting back to some of their more legalistic ways. But we don't really know who it was who necessarily asked this question. But what we do see is with the answer that we do know that Jesus himself did fast. He was a believer in fasting. But what Jesus did, not like the disciples of John and not like the Pharisees, what they did in public and to get attention on themselves, Jesus did privately. I mean, when he fasted, no one else knew about it. Jesus did teach them to fast, just to go and do so in a more private way. So over in Matthew chapter 6, we see this. Jesus says in Matthew 6, verse 16, "Moreover, when you fast, do not be like the hypocrites, with a sad countenance, for they disfigure their faces, that they may appear to men to be fasting. Assuredly I say to you, they have their reward. But you, when you fast, anoint your head and wash your face, so that you do not appear to men to be fasting, but to your Father who is in the secret place. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you openly." What a challenging message this is, because a lot of times we want to receive attention upon ourselves. And Jesus is saying, no, this is not about you. This is about you privately getting alone with God. And so with the idea of fasting, as opposed to looking all homely or looking like, oh, woe is me, to go ahead and continue with a lively life so that others have no idea that you are forsaking something to spend time with God. Fasting and other practices of spirituality are not for public display, and they're not for public knowledge. They're not for you to receive the praise. They're all about Jesus being lifted up and you bowing the knee, as we talked about this morning, to humbly submit yourself to Him. The Pharisees were not this way. It was well known that they fasted twice a week, and they did so in a public manner. But Jesus is teaching something brand new to them. And that's kind of what we'll look at tonight as we continue all these verses, the brand new things that Jesus is introducing to them. And it's not necessarily brand new. It's just that they didn't understand what the Scriptures were pointing to. Verse 34 says, "And he said to them, Can you make the friends of the bridegroom fast while the bridegroom is with them? But the days will come when the bridegroom will be taken away from them. Then they will fast in those days." Here we see that Jesus is telling us that He is the bridegroom. This is, once again, tying in so perfectly with this morning. It's all about the celebration. The celebration that we know of a wedding. Those in here who have been married, you know of the great celebration that takes place. I often tell people when I'm officiating a wedding that I have to meet with the bride-to-be, the groom-to-be. We have to put in at least 6 hours of pre-marriage counseling. I want to make sure that we're getting things off on the right foot, that we're doing things in a godly way, and that I'm giving them the tools that they need to succeed and not follow the statistics and end in divorce. And so I want to give everything I've got to help that couple not only start strong, but to finish strong in their wedding. But oftentimes when I'm having this time of counsel, I will look to the groom and I will ask him some questions about, well, what do you want in the wedding? And they go, I don't care. I mean, it's her day. Well, he's partly right. It is her day, and something that she's probably been dreaming about since she was just a little girl. And there's a lot of things that she has thought very, 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 very much about, and put a lot of planning into this. And he's just kind of going along with the flow. But then when I turn to the bride and say, well, what do you want? And what are the things? And she'll start going through this long laundry list of things that she wants, and it's planned, and it's got to be this way. And sometimes I'll ask the question, well, what if your mom says to do this or do that? And she says, no, this is my day. Okay, I understand. Are you paying for this? Oh, well, no, Mom and Dad are going to pay for it. All right, okay. Well, this is your day, and I know your mom and dad want to give you your day, but you also got to remember that this is the biggest party that your mom and dad will ever throw in their lives. You might want to help them. You might want to consider that as they make plans as well, to not make it all about you, but to include your family. And so I think that's good words of advice. I hope I'm not leading anybody astray when I do that, because I do want the bride to feel like it's her day. I also want the groom to feel like it's his day as well. But I know that whoever's forking out all that money, they need to have a little say in this too. And so it is a great celebration. It's a big party. It is something that we need to celebrate, because marriage is what God has brought together. And we want it to be all about Him. Well, he says in verse 35 that the day is coming. The day is coming. Fasting is often associated with at least four of these things. In Matthew chapter 9, fasting is associated with sadness. In Matthew chapter 17, fasting is associated with prayer. And many times we often consider fasting a time of prayer. In the book of Isaiah chapter 58, fasting goes along with charity. But probably more than anything, maybe even more than our concept of what a real heartfelt prayer is like, fasting probably is most closely associated with seeking the Lord's will, as seen in Acts chapter 13 and also in chapter 14. And those are times where we see in Scripture that it's appropriate and necessary for us to fast. And so we see here in these verses that the day is coming, that the disciples, they will be sad one day when their leader, their Jesus, the one that they've been following, he will be taken and be no longer with them. That will be a sad day. And there will be a day coming that the disciples need to pray in order to talk to Jesus. But not now. They can talk to Jesus right now, face to face. And a day is coming when the disciples will seek the Lord's will. But that day is coming. That day is coming that they need to fast, not today. At this point, the disciples, they have a physical Jesus that they can talk to, they can touch, they can be with, they can be in His presence. But for you and I, we need those days. We need time to get alone with Jesus. So let's talk a little bit about the lost art of fasting. It is a lost art in many churches today. We don't teach it. We don't necessarily practice it, especially us Baptists, because what do? Well, when we meet, we got to eat, right? I mean, Baptists are well known for their potluck meals, pre-COVID, but we like to have our meals. In fact, just tonight, before we got ready to come to church tonight, Landry asked me, he said, Daddy, are you going to get everybody together so we can go out to eat after church like we used to do? I mean, that's the highlight of Sunday nights, right, is getting the fellowship, to sit around the dinner table and just enjoy each other's company and share some laughs and some good food. We like to eat, and most of us we demonstrate that very well with our bellies. But you know what? Fasting doesn't necessarily have to be from food. I mean, obviously, those it's the prime example that's set for us, and the reason why that is because food is a necessity. We need food, but when we go without food, every time that stomach begins to growl, and let us know, hey, it's time to eat. And mine usually does around 11:45 on a Sunday morning. That's how I know it's time for me to wrap up my sermon, because my stomach is telling me it's time to go to the restaurant. Our stomach begins to growl, let us know that it's time to eat. Well, when we're in the process of fasting and spending time with Christ, when that stomach growls, when that stomach pains, that's when it reminds us, like an alarm clock, I need to pray. I need to seek the Lord's will. I need to spend time with Him. But the idea of fasting is just to remind us to get alone with God and seek His face. And so there are other things that you can fast from, not only food. Obviously, we definitely can fast from food, and we should. But you know what? There are probably other things in your life that are keeping your attention away from God. Maybe TV. Maybe you spend too much time watching TV. Maybe it's you are always on the internet. Maybe it's social media like Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. Maybe it is your phone and you can't stop talking to somebody on the phone or texting. Maybe it's just surfing using your phone to go through all your apps, and you just all on your phone. It's always so sad to me when we're out in public and we see a family sitting around the table, and all four of them, or all five of them, however many there, are all on their phones and no one's talking to each other. That's because we are now entered into a society where everybody has got the phone neck, and we walk around like this all the time. Well, maybe the phone is something to fast from. Shopping, for those who are compulsive shoppers. Sports, if all you do is think about sports day and night. Or anything else that occupies your thoughts and your time. If you are so infatuated with other things that you could be spending time with God, then those are good things to fast. Are any of those things bad? No. It's when they take your time away from God is when they become bad. And so if there's something that's taking up too much of your time, then those are good things to fast. So instead of partaking in one of these extracurricular activities, why don't you take a break and use those same times to spend time with God? Now, let's go to verse 36, and we see that the bridegroom, who is Jesus Christ, brings the new garment. We talked about this again this morning when he gives that brand new, white, clean, shiny linen, and he gives that to us. Well, now we're talking about here where he brings the new garment. Verse 36 says, "Then he spoke a parable to them. No one puts a piece from a new garment on an old one. Otherwise, the new makes a tear, and the piece that was taken out from the new, does not match the old." I'm going to stop right there as we look at verse 36. He's using an analogy here, and really it's a humorous analogy at that, talking about patching old clothes with new cloth. When you patch the hole in maybe your old favorite jeans that you've been wearing for 20 years, that you put a patch maybe on the knee. I think I've had one patch where I had something in my back pocket, and I was with the kids, and we went to the park and slid down the slide, and whatever I had in my back pocket ripped a hole in my back pocket. Well, I tried to have that patched, and you know what? Within the year, that patch wore off. It tore loose. It didn't last. And there are reasons for that. One is your patch is never pre-shrunk to match your jeans or whatever clothes you're having to patch. And not only that, but the hole itself is now a weak spot in the fabric. Those clothes will never be the same. It's kind of like when you wreck your car. Yeah, you can go and you can find parts for the car. You can have them replaced, and you can have the new parts put on your old car. But anybody will tell you that car will never be the same. The door won't close the same. The hood won't close the same. Whatever it is that was wrecked or damaged, it just won't be the same. So he uses this analogy here of cutting up brand new clothes to put on the old clothes. And so this is his humor that he's using right here. If you had a pair of jeans that had holes all over them, would you run to the store and go buy you some brand new, very expensive jeans, only to take home and cut them up so you can then take those little cuts of cloth and place on the old. No, we wouldn't. Well, I wouldn't do that. Us normal people wouldn't do that. Some of you might do something like that. I don't know. But that's not what the sane thing to do is. If you're going to go out and spend a fortune on new designer jeans, then those are the jeans you need to be wearing, not cutting them up to put patches on your old clothes. Most of us would throw out the old clothes, or at least use them for lawn work, and then we would wear the brand new clothes. And Jesus is here teaching us that the old rituals and the old practices that the Jews followed, that they believed, were just that, old. But Jesus is the new way. Jesus has a way to God through his path to the cross. Jesus did not come to patch up the old way. He didn't come to patch up the legalistic rituals of the Pharisees. He didn't come to say, oh, yeah, you're close. Let's just steer this way. No, he came to provide a new way for us to come to have a relationship with God. Because when we just put patches on the old, it might last for a short time. It's temporary. But Jesus is eternal. And Jesus provides a way to have a relationship with God that is eternal. And that's why our celebration is a celebration that lasts for all eternity. The third thing we see tonight is in verses 37 and 38. And here the bridegroom brings the new wineskins. Verse 37 says, "And no one puts new wine into old wineskins, or else the new wine will burst the wineskins and be spilled, and the wineskins will be ruined. But new wine must be put into new wineskins, and both are preserved." Now, does anybody in here have some wineskins laying around the house? I dare say probably none of us in this room has ever bought wineskins. I mean, I've never even drunk wine before, so I definitely don't have any new or old wineskins for that matter. And so let me kind of give a little explanation of what a wineskin is and how it was used for those of us who are teetotalers and don't have any clue what a wineskin was even used for. I'll try to condense this down so I don't make anybody run out of here, because I know this probably will be a little bit graphic. So I will try my best to cut out some of that stuff. But wineskins were made from goat skins. After the meat was used for feeding the family, the skin was then used. Their hides were cleaned and then cured, and the holes were then sewed up to make it a pouch, and they would use the neck hole to pour what really was grape juice into this pouch, this pocket that was the goat's hide. So they would pour the grape juice into this pouch, and then they would tie up the hole to make the skin airtight. And over time, the juice would then begin to ferment in order to make wine. And through this fermentation process, it would produce a gas, and it would cause the pouch to expand. But once the skin was used as a wineskin, it would then be stretched to its limit. And after they would then use the juice that was inside this wineskin, it was poured out, that wineskin didn't shrink back down. It wasn't elastic. It didn't go out and back and back. It had reached its limit, and that's where it stayed. And it would stay fully stretched out. And so after they had poured out all the juice that was inside the wineskin, you wouldn't then pour in brand new grape juice, just let it go through the same process again, because that skin is already stretched out to its max. If they would close it up, the same process would begin to happen. The gases inside that skin would want more room, and it would burst. And so then the wineskin is ruined, as well as the wine that was in the wineskin, and that would be useless to everyone. And so Jesus didn't use old wineskin. He is now telling us we need the new wineskin, that he is the new wineskin. The fourth thing is that the bridegroom brings the new wine. Not just the new wineskin, but the new wine. Verse 39 says, "And no one, having drunk old wine, immediately desires new, for he says, the old is better." Jesus brought something new. Unfortunately, most people don't want what he has to offer. They don't want his new. They want the old. They want the comfortable. They want to keep things unchanged. And as we had talked about before, change is inevitable. The only thing that never changes is that change happens. We will have change. And this building is a prime example of that. Most of us in this room probably said, "Oh, it's gorgeous." But for every 10 people saying it's gorgeous, there's somebody going, "Can't believe they did that. What were they thinking?" And there's always going to be the negative Nelly, the one who finds the fault in something, the glass half empty. And we will always have that. But if we continued as is and didn't have any change, then we would see more carpet buckles and more stains on the carpet and more scuffs on the wall and more choir spread out and couldn't fit into the choir loft and more things that just look like 2001 and not 2021. So change is necessary. And as you've heard me say, since change is going to occur, I would rather be the orchestrator of change instead of letting change happen to me. And so that is the necessity of that very thing, to do what is that, following this example that Christ had, that he brought something new, even though not everybody wants what he has. Jesus' way does not mix with the old. You cannot simply add him to your regiment. You cannot say, "I'm going to keep on doing things my way, and then I'll bring Jesus along with me. I'm going to just add that to my list." It doesn't work that way. That's what a lot of denominations or religions try to do. They will add him, but that's not what it's all about. Jesus is all about surrender. You give up. You commit to him. Many people would just rather stay the same and not change, but Jesus himself is all about change. In fact, if you have not allowed him to change you, then I would say that you're not saved, because there is change. Now, I know some in here are like me. You grew up in church. You grew up with a knowledge of Christ, and you probably didn't have a big wayward period of your life where you didn't run from God. And you have a marvelous testimony that God preserved you and did great and mighty things through you and kept you on his path. Even before your salvation, you were already headed in the right direction. Praise God for that. But even with that being said, even if that is you and your testimony as well as mine, there's still a change that takes place. A change from doing what self wants to do to doing what Christ wants to do. A change from not doing the wrong thing out of fear of trouble or punishment, but the fear of wanting to be right with God. And so there is an inward change that has to take place. And if you haven't experienced some type of change, then you really need to confront your own self and examine your own heart and make sure that you are a child of God. Many people do not want or like what Jesus has to offer. They don't want to have to change their lifestyles. But if he reigns supremely in your life, then he will chip and he will shape and mold and make you who he wants you to be. Has he been working on you? Have you seen a difference in your life? Are you brand new each and every day because of the work of Jesus Christ? If not, then right now would be a great time for you to give your life to Christ. We're going to have our time of invitation, and as the Holy Spirit is speaking to you, I pray that you will hear him today. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for our time tonight. We thank you for your word and how it has the power to speak to us and draw us to you. And Father, as we have now come this time of invitation, and as your Spirit is speaking to us, God, I pray